Aloha, everybody. Hi, this is Dan Chun, co-founder and president of Hawaiian Islands Ministries, or as we call it, HIM, and you're listening to the HIM Podcast, where we feature some of the great thought leaders from around the world, in America and beyond, as we kind of penetrate some deep thoughts about life issues, about ministry. And today we are so grateful to have Grant Skeldon with us. And let me just say hi to Grant, and then let me tell you a bit about him. So, aloha, welcome on board, Grant. Great to have you with us.
Howdy from Tennessee, in Nashville, Tennessee. But yeah, honored to be with you guys, Dan.
There you go, a howdy from Nashville. Makes my heart feel warm, but aloha is our way also. So fantastic, Grant, you're with us. So Grant lives in Nashville, Tennessee with his wife, Cheyenne, and he has this incredible ministry. He serves as the Next Gen Director for Think, and that's spelled THINQ. He works with Gabe and Rebecca Lyons. Gabe Lyons has been a guest, a speaker for HIM for conferences. And what does Think do? Well, Think helps people develop cultural discernment, and it enables them to engage in any topic with confidence and create conversations that lead hopefully to amazing spiritual maturity and wisdom. And he's the next gen guy, so we're going to be talking about next generation, young leaders. We're talking about discipleship, but really the big question is, how do we raise up leaders, and how do we understand the next generation that's coming or is here? But just so you know, Grant has written for the Wall Street Journal, for Relevant Magazine, the Gospel Coalition, and I think he's like the youngest leader to be featured on the cover of Outreach Magazine, unless Taylor Swift has been on recently. I don't know. His book, The Passion Generation, has, I love this, has helped thousands of pastors. I love this phrase, helps pastors and leaders to reach, raise, and retain the next generation. And maybe your church, your community is like struggling. Well, how do we deal with the next gen, and how do we raise them up really into maturity and work with them? So, Grant, phenomenal. That's my intro for you, and so grateful that you're with us. So let's just begin. How did you get into ministry generally? Before Think, how did you get led to Christ and come into ministry?
Led to Christ was around 16 years old. I was dating a girl for about 3 years in high school, and as you probably know, Dan, when you're in high school, two things is you kind of find your identity often in a sport or in a relationship or just something other than God, and you kind of it's a couple common things, but you usually find your identity, you pursue that, and for me it was basketball. For many years I played, me and my closest friends played basketball, and then I was dating a girl for 3 years. The second thing is when you date someone for 3 years in high school, people think you're going to be high school sweethearts. People definitely saw us together, and we were decently popular at our school. I was on the basketball team, she was the captain of the hip hop team, and I always joke that it was like a ghetto high school musical in the making. And it was, everyone thought we'd get married, but one day I realized that she had been cheating on me, and it just crushed me. And it was the first time I had been vulnerable, and really been in that long of a relationship, and really did think we had a future together. And so when it ended so badly, I just felt so crushed and betrayed and hurt. And by the grace of God, about a month later, I actually ended up going to church, and for the first time I was kind of like searching. I was in a searching posture. One bad thing that also happened is after I got broken up with, I actually got kicked off the basketball team that same week because I had kind of got into a fight with one of the players on the team. I just wasn't in the best mind space, and I think I really got stripped of what my identity was back then. And I wouldn't have used the word identity back then, but that's what I put my identity in. And I heard the gospel on the back row of a church Wednesday night service for youth, and they gave an opportunity for a relationship with the Lord. And there was a song by Switchfoot, actually. It's the song "This Is Your Life, Is This Who You Want to Be?" is the main lyric and question of the song. And I really was pondering that question, like, this is my life, is this who I want to be? The next question is, it everything you imagined it would be? And that was just perfect timing for me to really process that, because I knew I was falling into what I was in because of my own decisions and priorities. And knew I was running from God. And I just kind of decided, okay, I've been running from God, who's been pursuing me and patient with me, and I'm running from him. And then I've been running towards and exhausting myself to become something for other people, and they have abandoned me. Why would I not just go with the one when Jesus, of course, says, hey, behold, in the Great Commission, I will always be with you, even to the ends of the age. And so I went pretty all in. It was March 8th, 2006. I was 16 years old. And by the grace of God, a huge thing, Dan, was 2 weeks after I got saved, there was a man who called me and saw my card that I had filled out for giving my life to Jesus. And just basically, the long story short, is he kind of challenged me to, I would take my faith seriously, he would disciple me, take me under his wing, and he wanted to pour into me. The only catch was, he said, you got to try to reach as many kids at your school for Christ as you can. And so it was a really great vertical relationship with Jesus that had just formed 2 weeks in, and then immediately a vertical relationship with a mentor who was kind of saying, like, Paul, follow me as I follow Christ. And then a horizontal mission, go and reach all your friends for Jesus. And so, as you know, you learn different when you know you're learning for others. It's kind of like why so many times parents kind of come back and boomerang back to church, because they're like, oh, I got kids now, I can't do this on my own. Like, I need to seek wisdom. And for me, feeling the responsibility and the weight of, man, I do want to reach my friends for Christ, and there's not any other Christian friends I have here. Okay, I'm going to go and learn on Wednesday nights, and I'm going to, it was like a launching pad to go back and be a missionary at my school.
That is so cool. Golly, I'm trying to think. You may be the only teenager I know who's listening to a song, a Switchfoot song, and they really listening to the lyrics and how that was a hook. That's an incredible story. And Switchfoot has been one of our guests for the HIM conference too.
Really?
So, and I should say, everybody, Grant is going to be one of our main plenary speakers and an elective speaker for Hymn 25, which we're also calling HDND, Hope Does Not Disappoint. So that's coming up in March. So everybody, don't miss that. So, wow, interesting story. It's kind of like BC before Cheyenne, and then AD after dating or destruction.
Yeah.
Dad jokes. Sorry, Grant. So you probably heard that 1,000 times.
My wife is Cheyenne, for you guys that don't know.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I thought I'd said that earlier. Well, my bad.
You probably did. You probably did, actually.
Okay. So anyway, oftentimes if we're converted in the age of 15, 16, we have a heart for young people. It kind of and you have a heart for evangelism. Yeah. But you have a super big heart for the next generation. Sometimes they're called Gen Z or Gen Y or other things. Mm-hmm. And they get a bad rap in some sense, but there's great promise. And just to kick things off, you came up with this wonderful thing of a variety of words starting with C. And if I can make it go on, because it's concise and crisp. And so maybe you could share some of that. And we're going to really talk about how do we really talk to the next generation, whether in our church, and maybe this is going to be helpful for you who are parents. Like, how do we really help mature them or disciple them in their spiritual walk? So let's start off. What are the 7 C's, or not the 7 C's, I'm sorry, there are probably more, but 9 or 10 C's. What are they? And then we'll use that as a Kickstarter.
Yeah, there's a couple things that have happened to this new generation that makes it very difficult for them to just navigate the world today. One of them is that they, I would say, have been coddled by their parents. They've also been criticized by their bosses. They've been confused, definitely, by our culture. They've been cheated by their colleges. And then I would say they've been canceled for their convictions. And so when I say about being coddled by their parents, is often we save our kids from the Savior. Some of the hardest times in our life often are the times when we get closest to God. Like, if you thought about what seasons have you been the most dependent on the Lord, they often are when they're not easy times, they're not mountaintop times sometimes, but there are seasons where we're so reliant and so in His Word. Often it can be times that are difficult, and that's when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We fear no evil, because we know, even here God is with me. His staff and His rod, they comfort me. But I joke, if we always save our kids from failure, definitely save them from consequences that they put on themselves, then we're saving them from one, learning lessons, life moments, development, maturing, but we're saving them from the moments where they get to rely on Jesus, because we just save them from those times. They never have to feel a reliance where they need something bigger than themselves. And so instead of, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for God is with me, his rod and his staff comfort me. I jokingly say, I think they read it, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for mom is with me. Her purse and her second chances, they comfort me. And so there's, hey, we'll give you the money I know you made that mistake, we'll pay for that. Or hey, you know what, just go ahead and give them a second chance over and over again. And I know it's good intentions, but you don't want to save them from the Savior. But then if you do coddle the kid, they then go into the workplace, and their work ethic is so, it hasn't materialized, it hasn't matured. So they're bound to get criticized by their bosses. They're bound to not do well in work, and that's going to really lead to an anxiousness and anxiety, because they want to make a big impact with their life, but they can't seem to get there as fast as they thought they were going to get there. Confused by our culture, I mean, that's pretty, we've seen a very unique culture that kids are having to grow up in, and parents are definitely getting more involved as they're seeing what our culture is teaching our kids about who they are. And then cheated by their colleges. I say that just because so many kids are graduating college, and they're so terrified of what's next, because I would just say colleges don't seem to be getting jobs for young people like they used to, and a bachelor's degree doesn't set them up and set them apart like it used to. Often I feel like it's a better chance of kids going into debt than a guarantee of getting a job, and that shouldn't be the guarantee. And then lastly,
before you go to the next one, I just want to say, everybody should read the David Brooks article. It came out in various places, I think Wall Street, maybe New York Times or the Atlantic. But he really lays into the whole college system that America has set up. Way too expensive. Is it really that helpful? Certain ideas are being propagated that may not be mainstream. And it's a fascinating article that college may not be for everybody, but it certainly is rigged with wrong criteria on SATs, and are the ones who are the best test scores the best students, really. And then of course the cost. It's way too much. It's way too much. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So coddled by parents, criticized by bosses, confused by culture, cheated by their colleges, and then lastly canceled for their convictions. There are convictions that you can hold that can now get you canceled, and that's really hard too for young people when when you're young, you really care about how people see you. As you mature, you start to be confident in your identity in Christ, and you're not looking for your approval of man as much. But when you're young, there's not as much social status you're going to get from being a Christian. In fact, you'll probably lose that. Now, there's a silver lining to that, I believe, is Charles Spurgeon said, you're either a missionary or you're an imposter. It's like there is no middle ground and lukewarm position. And I do think in the American church there used to be, like, it almost was better if you were to say you're a Christian. But the times have changed, and so it will cost you to be a Christian. And I think that's personally good, but it is hard when you're young and if you're going to choose of like what's going to be cool, dying to yourself is not cool. Some of the convictions to hold are not cool. Not going out to party is not cool. And so you got to disciple these kids to know what's really, really worth it. Like, where is the true treasure in life? And then, Dan, I'll say really quickly, because I've spent a little time on that one. These are things that are in the world that the next generation is growing up in, that they have to navigate and figure out. That's a little different than before. But there are things that I think they've done poorly, and they've added to making it harder. For example, if you don't follow God's word, you don't submit to his way, and you don't follow his will, it's not going to work. Like, he came to bring life and life to the fullest. And so if you don't want life, it's not going to work. And there's areas where the next generation has prioritized other things than God's way. For example, they are consumed with technology. The next generation is conquered by pornography. They are caged by comparison. They are coping with anxiety, and often they are crippled by debt. And so these are other things that they're navigating in this new world. The good news, I will say,
unique to this generation.
Yeah, but I always don't want to just focus on the negatives. With every pendulum swing, there are opportunities to develop a generation. So I say that they're called into God's image. I believe they have been commissioned to bring redemption into this broken world. And there's things that I do see, like that missionary thing. They are almost forced to become a missionary. Millennials grew up seeing a lot of our friends leave the church. Gen Z grew up often knowing not many friends in the church. So they just became missionaries if they became Christians. I see a hunger for God's word like never before, a power, belief in the power of the gospel, not just being cool in Gen Z that I haven't seen. I think a vulnerability of actually being willing to confess some of their sins and not just hide it or wear a mask. I think with the emotional health and the rise of importance in Gen Z compared to especially like boomer generation, that they'll like share their scars. There are some of these things that are really good news too. So they're not just navigating difficult things. There are some things that are silver lining that are rising up, especially if we can come alongside them and disciple them.
So here, if you're a pastor, you're a parent, you're a ministry leader, and you hear about all these C's that you just listed. So now the challenge is, how do we cultivate and nurture and, as you say, retain young adults in our churches or even communicate in our families? So what have you found that works as you do this, since you're with Think and this is kind of your specialty?
Well, I mean, my biggest emphasis is definitely going to be if there was anything close to a silver bullet, would be discipleship. And I've already used that word a couple times, is the best, most high capacity young leaders, the ones who are super humble, they're like pursuing holiness. They just, I don't know, they walk with even a certain type of authority and anointing. Often, if not always, they were young people that in their teenage and at least in their 20-something years, they were discipled. They had some type of mentor or disciple maker or older person investing in their life very intentionally, very strategically. I personally differentiate mentorship and discipleship. I believe both are very, very important and very, very powerful, but they're not exactly the same. I believe that mentorship is kind of like saying, come and meet with me. It's meeting regularly with someone and pouring into them. Maybe it's talking through their life, praying over them, going through the word together, checking in. But that's not the same as discipleship. Mentorship, come and meet with me. Discipleship, come and follow me. And that's more like join me for this or come with me to that. And the guy who discipled me, Kevin Batista was his name, 2 weeks in. In a year and a half of getting discipled by him, I only met with him maybe twice. We went to IHOP once and a Starbucks once in a year and a half. And I met with him. I shared my life. He kind of gave me advice or prayed over me, XYZ. But I came and joined him all the time. If he was doing stuff with the youth, or sometimes it was a lot of stuff with youth, I would join him at his work. Sometimes his hobbies and fun things he liked to do. But he was really big on come and follow me type of discipleship. And why I think that's important to differentiate is because most people view discipleship as what I would call mentorship, that meet with me. And most people don't have a lot of extra time and free time. A lot of people I know have the best intentions and goodwill where they want to make disciples. But if you ask the broader church, do you have a relationship that's clear and committed to someone younger in the faith? A lot of people don't have that kind of relationship. Even though Jesus did say, go and make disciples, we don't tend to have that kind of clear relationship that we've communicated to a younger person. And it's not because we don't care about what Jesus called us to do, or we don't think there's value there. It's because number one excuse I've actually heard, it's not even spiritual. I just don't have time. And so I like to help understand, like, one of the best things you can do is maybe then disciple, which isn't like mentorship, where the key thing I say is mentorship is adding something to your calendar, and discipleship is including someone in your calendar. And so if you are too busy to add one more thing to your calendar, many of us are. Dan, I gotta assume you're not thinking next week and the week after that, man, what am I going to do with all my free time? And I got to assume it's like, no, we got a lot of things to do. We're trying to take things off our calendar. That I would say to busy people, and most of us are, then maybe you need to disciple someone. It's like, okay, here's my busy calendar. If I could find someone who's hungry and available and teachable that wants to join me, then I'm open to it. I don't have the bandwidth in this season to do a lot of meetings, but I do have the availability and vulnerability to invite some people to join my world.
So let me get clarity of that. Did you say you only had like one or two like formal sit-down meetings with this person, and the rest was hangout time, in a sense? And watch me, follow me time. That's incredible, because most people think, oh, I got to sit down and, I pull out a 14-week curriculum or something. But yours
Yeah.
is more like the road to Emmaus, or, walking along from Jerusalem or Jericho to Jerusalem or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that often we think of Christian leadership. First, we think it's speaking, and most of the time, I think speaking, the gift of speaking, is the most overglorified gift in the church. It's not a bad gift; it's just the most glorified gift. And I think there's way more people that think to be a leader is to be a great communicator or theologian, and not to be a great disciple maker. But what Jesus called us to do, and generally what he did, was make disciples. Like, if it was speaking, then Jesus really should have focused way more on the 5,000. That's where we generally focus.
That's right.
In the American church.
We only see the 5,000, the 7,000. There should have been like 50 of those events, right?
Yeah,
like
just keep
Promise
doing that.
Keepers, or
Exactly.
like Passion, going across the country and oh, that's fascinating. This is like mind blowing what you're saying, because you know what? It's freeing up for the lay people to say, I can't do a 10-week curriculum discipling somebody, right? And you're saying, hang out time and just watch me. Maybe even notice how I say grace before a meal, and or when somebody's mad at me, how I respond. Or so you were going to say something. I'm sorry, I interrupted, but I'm just blown away by this kind of revolutionary way of, and you're going to expand. You're expanding the possibility of people saying, I can do that.
Yeah, I want to remove like every barrier or excuse for why people feel like they can't. Because I've yet to meet any Christian say, I don't care about discipleship. Like, that's just not for me. I don't value that. It's usually like, no, I see the value in it. Grant, I don't know how. Like, the 4 reasons I hear why people don't say they don't make disciples. It's not because they don't care or they don't value it. Usually they'll say, 1, I don't have time. I sincerely don't feel like I have time. I want to, I don't have time. 2, they'll say, I honestly, if I'm real, I don't feel qualified. Like, what would a young person want to learn from me? Do you really think I have anything to offer someone younger in the faith? I'd feel a little bit nervous to ask someone if I could disciple them. And what if I get rejected? So it's I don't have time, or it's I don't feel qualified. Third, and is a huge one, and I tell young people, really pay attention to this one and give grace to this one, because sometimes young people could be like, yeah, none of you guys disciple us. And I'm like, hey, the third reason I hear them say is, no one discipled us. Like, you want us to do something and give you something we never received. Like, I don't know how to do it because I never got discipled. And that's usually the fourth one. Because no one discipled me, I don't know how. I just don't know what it even should look like. And so, just going back to that 5,000 concept, in the American church, if we imposed our leadership style onto Jesus, we definitely would have seen him as a failure for not seeing the unbelievable opportunity of the 5,000.
Oh,
like,
my
anyone
gosh.
today would be like, how in the world did you just get on a boat and leave the 5,000? What kind of follow-up plan is that? You should have built at a minimum, a conference once a year that we do, but ideally a church, a mega church. It's a best start, like, launch team in the world, and just do it next week. And ironically, I said mentorship is come and meet with me. Discipleship is come and follow me. Most churches, what we're saying is, come and listen to me. That's the big call to action. Come back next week. Got a brand new message, brand new speaker, or we're starting a brand new series. And it's a lot of come and listen to me. And now I don't demonize any of those 3. I think all 3 of those Jesus used. He lectured in the temples and the synagogues, and of course the Sermon on the Mount. He did come and meet with me. He met with Nicodemus. He met with different people. And he said, come and follow me. So all 3 of those are biblical. It's just I get concerned when we're mostly saying, come and listen to me, and we're not equipping our people to say, come and follow me and come and meet with me.
Wow. You are, yeah. And nobody wants to meet with somebody again like, oh, he's going to talk at me for the next 40 minutes. Yeah, that's a real downer. And he may be giving bad theology anyway. So, okay, golly, I got a zillion questions. So first of all, when you met with your mentor/discipler, was that like once a month? I mean, I can't imagine you being with them every day. So
No, not every day. Yeah.
Yeah. So once a month, once a week. I mean, really, realistically.
So for me, I was meeting with Kevin maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks was pretty general. It was often going on Wednesdays before church and helping him set up and helping him through different things. It was helping in small groups. Sometimes different nights he would visit different youth small groups. So he was really good at including and inviting.
And he was a lay person. He wasn't a...
No, he was the youth pastor. Yeah.
Okay.
But I've been discipled by others that aren't church staff, because I don't like this message being heard and thinking, okay, why aren't our pastors discipling us? Like, there's not enough pastors to do it. My hope is that every person feels like they could disciple someone. And how I define that type of relational discipleship is frequently following someone who is spiritually just a couple steps ahead of you. And I like that language of frequently following someone just spiritually a couple steps ahead, because it helps with those warranted excuses. Is frequently, not all the time, not every day, like you're asking Dan. Also, you're just spiritually a couple steps ahead, because people do ask, am I qualified? And I think that's the enemy's question. Jesus, I don't think almost ever asked anyone, are you qualified? It's more like, are you willing? And so my thing isn't, are you qualified? My question is, do you feel like you're spiritually a couple steps ahead of some of the young people in your church? Because they'll say no to feeling qualified, but they'll definitely say, yes, I feel spiritually a couple steps ahead. So that's all you got to do. Like, Paul didn't say, follow me and I'll make you like Christ. He said, follow me as I follow Christ. I'm just spiritually a couple steps ahead. And I think that releases the pressure we put on ourselves of, we need to be elite leader in order to make disciples.
So let me ask this. What do you say to a board member or a parent? That's why we pay the youth pastor full time. He should do it.
Yeah.
Or she should do it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say
that?
It's a good question. I would say that you pay the pastors to build up the body and equip the saints for the work of ministry. You may have been under the misunderstanding that was something different, and maybe we as the American church have done a poor job of making it seem like you can offload discipleship onto us. But discipleship happens at home first. Well, most of us know that, and they say discipleship is caught more than it's taught. And so all of us, especially as parents, are making disciples. What kind of disciples you're making, that's up to your level of intentionality. But yeah, where ministry is supposed to be, which we have not done the best job of doing this in the American church, but it's supposed to be building up the body and equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. And so I'm actually all for and okay that we are limited a little bit more as ministers to a come and listen to me model. So, and it's almost like, come and let us equip you to go and meet with and have others follow you, because you're the masses anyway. Jesus discipled the 12, and the 12, in a lot of ways, we're here because the 12 continued. If my big thing that I'm like sold on discipleship on is, one, that Jesus left the 5,000. That's totally shifted my scorecard for what a real Christian leader is supposed to be, is not just a great speaker. And then two, it was just thinking about, if you take discipleship out of the story of the Gospels, like, let's say Jesus does everything we know him for. He walks on water. He heals people. He preaches the gospel over and over again. People get saved. He raises people from the grave. He raises himself from the grave on our behalf. The one thing you take out is he just didn't have 12 people there with him to witness it and to go and tell people afterwards. How much does that change all of us being in the body right now? Because when he goes, he's like, they don't go and do greater things. There's no one to go do anything. And so to me, I was like, wow, okay, this makes sense why when he rolls up his sleeves and shows us what leadership looks like, he chooses to make disciples. In fact, we don't even know what he was doing until he started making disciples. 30 years, we don't even know. It's once he started making disciples, and then his last words were literally, go and make disciples. So for me, I don't know how we've missed it so much. Of this is at the core center of like being a great leader, I think, is making disciples and just being a Christian. It's what we all can't do, because we're all spiritually a couple steps ahead of someone in our church.
Well, it just occurs to me, too, that if he didn't have them hanging out with him all that time, we wouldn't have the 4 Gospels today.
Yeah, they wouldn't tell it, yeah.
Like, I think I heard third hand that he said this at some meeting. And so, wow, this is mind-blowing. Okay, so let me push a little bit on the youth pastor thing. Yeah. So, yeah, youth pastors have a huge responsibility. And, you know, if they have 20 in their group or more in their group or whatever, you can only hang out with so many kids that often, right? So what you're saying is, if pastors are called to equip the saints, right, then part of the youth pastor, the effective youth pastor's job description is how are you going to develop, recruit, and nurture mentor disciplers
Yeah.
to hang out
Yeah.
with the kids. And therefore, you multiply, you build a stronger foundation of leadership for the youth ministry. And it's not, we paid you as a holy butler, go out to McDonald's with them, go out to Burger King, go out to whatever, and go to the beach with them, go surfing. You're paid to do that. It's get a team together. Get 12 disciplers together to do the masses. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
That has to be part of the job description.
Yeah. It's so cool.
If I could lean on youth pastors a little bit.
The common applications for a youth pastor in Hawaii is go and surf with them. Like I've just never heard that one in my whole life of ministry. That's
and
cool.
watch out for the sharks. Yeah.
Oh goodness, man. Yeah.
And it's a metaphorical sharks in life too.
Yeah. So let me think on this real quick. I was gonna share that. I think there's like three types of discipleship that seem to be like the major camps, and I am emphasizing one of those, and I want to be clear on what the other two are.
Okay.
And then we can also see what parents can do, and where pastors are limited is I would say when I was growing up on discipleship, it was more a kind of a navigator's model of going through a book. You've mentioned this already so you're not talking about like going through this book together or knowing how to go through this course. It was kind of like, I would say, memorization, and then maybe even biblical memorization. The one I'm kind of emphasizing isn't really the biblical memorization part. It's more the, I would call it leadership replication. It's like, I'm not going to just make sure you know this in your mind. I want to show you how to do this with your hands. Like, I want to show you how to lead and do this. And to the point where I think powerful leadership replication, or like this relational discipleship, happens when you can leave. Like Kevin Batista left and I continued to grow. Jesus left and the disciples continued to grow and make an impact. Often if we build church and the church culture around a person and it's all on that person, it just doesn't work. Like we've seen that whether it's with the youth pastor or it's with a senior pastor, because we've seen churches where the head guy, whether they fall or just retire, or just move, it's like we've seen churches just disappear, or like their campuses start shutting down. And that is because we've fallen into that model you're kind of talking about. It's like, hey, I pay you. This is kind of the transaction is I come, I show up, I drop them off. But that just hasn't worked, because that's the opposite of what happens with Jesus. Those people leave and it all kind of decimates. Jesus leaves and they go do greater things. And I think that's because it's on the leadership replication, not just you hear me speak and I'm really, really good at speaking. And then I do say the third point, you guys have had John Mark Comer at y'all's gathering. And what I've missed probably for 10, maybe even 15 years of discipleship is the third part, not just biblical memorization, not just leadership replication, but I would say like inner transformation. And that's where John Mark is so good at, is him and Pete Scazzaro, Rich Voyotis, a lot of the Desert Fathers, this emphasis on like going at the pace of Jesus, feeling like the presence of Jesus, being able to slow yourself to see people like Jesus saw people, to heal people, to like you have capacity. You actually have a light burden and an easy yoke, because I do think it's possible to know God's word well, lead well, but not feel a light burden or an easy yoke. And that's the third part. And last thing I'll say on this, because I'm going a little long on this answer, is I do think when you're young and with youth, they can't always like get in a car and just show up and follow someone, like especially children's ministry. So that's limited. So that might be a little bit more where, you can do biblical memorization. I think especially children's ministry is like, hey, you're not going to be able to come with us after church. You're not going to come with me on the weekend. I can't even have you come with me tonight. But so we're going to really focus on biblical memorization. We want this instilled in your heart, soul, and mind. But as you get older, you have a little more autonomy. I found my style of discipleship I'm emphasizing right now, that works best like later high school years, college, young adulthood, even young singles or young marrieds. But it's around, not always, but it's around like late 20s, early 30s, maybe even mid 30s, that people start kind of hitting that wall where they realize, oh, there's still something missing. Like, I feel like I'm trying to serve God and love God and be sanctified, but there's stuff missing, and I hit that wall. John Mark talks a lot about where you almost go through the dark night of the soul. You go through the season of like dryness, and you realize I maybe even hit burnout, and you realize, oh, there's some things missing. I've missed my whole Christian walk, and that's where that inner transformation is sought after. And so those timelines can happen a little bit at different times, but that's what I've found is those three areas happen at different times in people's seasons, and none of them are against each other, and none of them are better than the other, but they might not always work at every age or stage of life.
Mm-hmm. And just so for our viewers, if you're not familiar, John Mark, his last name is Comer, John Mark Comer, and he's been with, spoke for him a couple times, and he has a great book out.
Practicing the Way is his most recent one.
Yeah. And you're part of the preaching team of a church called Way Church. Is that related to John Mark at all?
It's not.
Say, oh man, you stole the name, or he stole it from you. Man, I got to talk to that guy.
I think we got it from somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it was the Bible. Is there way in it? Okay. Nobody copyrighted. So, and I think I love that. So, Bible memorization, leadership, replication, and the third one was inner transformation. Or you had another phrase. I don't know.
That was it.
And and I'm going to say this about we Protestants. Since I've stepped down for being a pastor at a church, I've been reading a lot, and actually I've probably attended 22 different churches in the last year, Protestant and Catholics. And what I've appreciated about the Catholics, I mean, they really see part of their life going way back. So they're reading, St. Ignatius and Loyola, and they're reading, St. Teresa of Avila. And it struck me like we Protestants, we get really into, we admire people with large churches, or if they're an author and they published a lot, right? Or they're very successful and they're wealthy. And then the Catholics are like, Mother Teresa helping the poor, like, oh, you guys are going to go for character? We don't, we go for like achievement. St. Francis, Father Damien here in Hawaii, Molokai, the lepers, he's no saint. Like, oh, you go for, again, you go for character, and it's so weird. Protestants have a whole different criteria, and that leads to this whole thing about discipleship, that we forget the inner transformation, and these church fathers and mothers are really part of our history. They're our grandparents, our great grandparents, and we sometimes think evangelical Christianity or Christianity in general, started in the 20s or something, or the 50s, or the Azusa revival, right? It's really weird. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the inner transformation, which I would say the Catholics are bigger on that than the Protestants in many ways. But like John Mark Comer, when you hear him, or John Ortberg, when you hear him speak, they're quoting a lot of these church fathers and church mothers. And for us, it's we pick more modern people, but it's mainly in church growth, or they're an author that published a lot of books. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And so as you go around and the country and speak to people, is there normally resistance on this, saying, oh, no, we want our people to disciple them with this curriculum of 25 weeks, and they walk through resurrection, and they walk through Pentecost and all that? Well, how do you sincerely feel it is as you go around and talk to pastors or churches trying to bring about diverse younger church leaders, uniting them in this effort?
Yeah, it's such a long answer for that one. And
give me the Reader's Digest version.
I know. I'm going to try to shorten that. Let me think in more succinct thoughts. I would say no one is against it that's a pastor. Everyone, I often see when I talk about discipleship, pastors like almost their brain firing off and thinking of their own story and journey. And they're like, oh, you're right. Like, people come to mind for them. That's what I want to happen. I'd even love to hear for you, Dan, who I'm sure there was someone or probably some people that if you took them out of your story, that they impacted you, they believed in you, put their neck on the line for you. But they start thinking of those people as like, hey, I'm trying to reverse engineer what makes a great young Christian leader. And then what makes them in the long run stay, and they even get more in love with God down the road. They get healthier, and they make an impact. Like those, that's what I'm looking for. In a world that's doing so much research on why young people are leaving the church, I'm trying to find why do some young people lead the church, or why do they lead in culture as believers. And with Think, I get the privilege to do these gatherings and private retreats for some of the most high capacity young Christian leaders in the nation. So these are speakers, authors, musicians, pro or Olympic athletes, actors, nonprofit leaders. And as I'm getting them together, I'm starting to see common themes. And it is often they had these people in their story as teenagers or young 20-somethings. And the more they had them, the more they became a great young, on fire for God, humble, holy leader. And so it's not ever a pushback. It's more the system is so hard to turn around or to add that. Like they're not also looking for one more thing to do. They already are pretty busy with the current model of the American church. And so my thing isn't like throw out what you've been doing. It's just add this to the scorecard. The first place I always tell churches to start is just start measuring discipleship. That's it. Just because I know it's a little bit of a trick, because I know if you start measuring discipleship yearly, it will force you to have to define what discipleship looks like for you guys and what your plan is, so that then you know if you did or did not make disciples that year. And then I know if you guys come up with a plan, that means you got to start doing some meetings to really iron that out. And ideally, if you're going to iron it out and get a plan, you're going to then create some support around that plan. And my big thing is too is like measure it, and then also just start getting your staff in the next year to commit to making disciples, and ideally even getting discipled. In my ideal world, all of us are getting poured into and pouring into someone, because there's always, no matter how old you are, there's always some people who are spiritually a couple steps ahead of you. Right now, actually, it's kind of a joke, but it's serious. I'm working on a slide I'm going to make, and maybe I'll have it ready for March, that just kind of identifies the seasons of life, because there always seems to be a next season that people are wondering, hey, what are you going to do in that next season? When you're single, the number one question you get asked is all the time, when are you gonna get a girlfriend, or when are you gonna get a boyfriend? And the second you get that boyfriend or girlfriend, they're like, oh, when are you thinking about proposing? And that's literally the night of your proposal, like at the proposal party, an engagement party, people will ask you. I was like shocked to see they will ask you, oh, when are you guys getting married? Like, I just tonight got engaged, and you guys are already asking when to get married. Once you're married, even leading up to the wedding, they're going to start asking, when are you guys thinking about having kids? And once you have your first kid, they're like, oh, when do you guys think you might have another? Are you open to another one? And I used to joke, okay, how long do they keep? What's the next one? And it sounds like they just keep asking, are you going to have another kid? Or when do your kids graduate? Where are your kids going to college? Then it's about all your kids. And it just keeps going and going. And my point is, whether it's empty nester or what is this in retirement going to look like after this, there's someone in the church or in your community of faith that's ahead of you that could say, hey, this is what faithfulness kind of looked like for me. This is what I learned. This is what I kind of regret. I wish I did this a little differently. And my ideal world is staff start and lead first. And they say, hey, we don't even know for our own staff, everyone, if they are making disciples or if they're getting discipled. But that's okay. That's somewhat normal. So let's start here with us, and let's fail forward. And then let's preach a sermon series on discipleship. And we'll have story after story of how we were trying to figure it out, how it was hard here. And that's going to resonate with real people. Because last thing I want to give massive grace for pastors is it's so much messier to do discipleship than it is to do a Sunday service. It's so much messier to do discipleship than to do small groups even. And small groups are messier than Sunday services. There's the iconic line.
What is messy about it, though? Oh, sorry. Say your iconic line.
Well, just the iconic line around is that rows. What is it? The iconic line is that circles are better than rows, and in a lot of ways they are more impactful than rows. But I would say that disciples are better than circles. Like, Jesus didn't call us to make rows. He didn't call us to make even circles. He did call us to make disciples. But making disciples is the hardest of all three of those. And I think when I say it's messy is that doing rows is a lot easier. I mean, that's set time, set place, and at this point, it's pretty set rhythm. Even if it's a Pentecostal church or a Presbyterian church, like it's generally a little bit of worship. How long that goes depends on the denomination. A little bit of announcements, a little bit of preaching. How long that goes depends on the denomination. The volume level depends on the denomination. And then some announcements maybe to close, and then a dismiss, maybe a benediction of some sort. But by and large, it's not crazy different. It's those elements, and the volume might change, and the passion might change, and the length might change depending on the denomination. But that's so much more controllable than this year. I might disciple one kid, and he might be the best, and he might be so hungry and so teachable. But next year, it might be someone else who's like, they thought they weren't serious about discipleship, but then 4 weeks in, they get a job somewhere else. They're all busy. They don't start showing up. They start making excuses, and they got a good heart. And it's messy because every person is going to be different. And keeping track of that schedule. Small groups, though, again, same place, same time. It gets smaller, so you actually are dealing with people. And so that's why it's harder, I think, than Sunday often, which is more, I don't want to say like a concert, but it's crazy far from a concert because it's us and them type of relationship. Right. This is face to face. This isn't like audience and speaker. And then discipleship, I mean, that's 1-to-1. It's all you and them. Like there's no one else here to help. Or maybe it's you and 4 others, if some people do disciple more than one person. I think that's amazing. Jesus clearly did that. I usually say 1 because if no one's discipled anyone, then I don't say don't jump to 3, but maybe you can. But it just gets messy because the proximity and the consistency with people on your own is harder.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so many thoughts racing through my mind. First of all, your forward thinking, forward lifestyle thoughts of like, oh, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? Maybe we should right at the beginning when somebody comes to Christ. So when are you going to lead your first person to Christ?
Yeah.
When are you going to disciple somebody? What? I got to disciple somebody? So, and it seems to me, being a pastor for 40 billion years, pastors generally, we are not good administrators. Number 2, it's, how do I, it seems to me part of your challenge is how to say to a pastor, here's an easy way to launch or easy way to administrate it, right? And maybe, as you said, start with the staff. Could we challenge the staff? Everybody pick up one person this year and see if they catch it and like it, and then maybe it'll duplicate or multiply. But it's, I just think, a lot of the pastors who want quote unquote new programs, they want something plug and play. Right, they love alpha, like roll the videos and small groups. Now small groups do take a while to organize, but it's alpha course. I mean, for people who don't know that,
right?
And which is really great, by the way. I'm a big fan of it. And so yeah, how does one administrate that to launch it? And can somebody like disciple more than one at the same time? I don't know if that's too much. You got to start with just one, but. Anyway, I don't know if you found success in trying to make it more user-friendly for a pastor who's overwhelmed, who's fearful, who is, obviously doesn't want to fail.
Yeah.
And
one of the even lighter ways than maybe going straight to one-to-one discipleship and finding out that schedule every week, which, by the way, for me, I give my Gmail calendar to the young people I disciple, and kind of, I got a couple things. Like I try to find out what do you want to learn from me? Like, let's get very specific. What are 3 things that I could help you in the next 6 months to a year? Just so I can learn what to focus on, what to invite them to. I have them come up with like a year plan, a 6-week, 6-month, 9-month, 1 year. Where do you want to be? Like, just even start thinking about that spiritually. Where do you want to be emotionally? Where do you want to be career? Where do you want to be? And so just having them think, so I can see where they're trying to go, what they want to learn from me, helps me know what to invite them to, and then I give them access to my calendar. But another thing that I've started doing that's been, I think a lot of people could have a lot of fun doing in a church is maybe it's you and a couple friends that are some of your closest friends in the church, you guys or you girls finding a couple younger girls or a couple younger guys and saying, hey, what if me and you got one person or 2 people? Like in my church, 3 of us have 3 other young people. I just got a text today that we're now re-upping because we went a year with this group. We're going to do another year, start in January, where we go to either one of us 3 guys' house every Monday morning at 6 a.m. And it is more mentorship. Come and meet with me. And we're going through the Bible together. But what I do like is it's a set time, it's a set place, and what I really like is it's a set group of close friends to me. Like, it's not just them coming to learn from me. It's me doing it with two of my closest friends in the church who also pick three guys. And since I really connect with those three guys, I know, and I found the people they tend to pick to pour into tend to relate well to them. So they generally usually relate well to me too. So there's some compatibility in chemistry that's already kind of there that I couldn't really put a finger on, but because I know I'm like them and I know them like those other three they picked, it does work well, and all of our community then gets together well. There is a benefit too, though, of when Jesus said something to one disciple, it may have been a lesson for them right now, and it was a lesson to a lot of them for later. And so I like to think there are things that may have been a teaching moment for one of the disciples, like James and John. Jesus had to almost like say, hey, you guys are asking for the left hand and the right hand of the Father. Your own mom is coming here to try to ask me about it. If I was one of the other disciples, I'd be taking notes like, do not ask if I can be the left hand or the right hand of the Father, and definitely don't bring my mom to ask him either. Or when Peter stops Jesus, and this is the biggest one, I would have been like, never do this. He stops him and trying to go to Jerusalem, and Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. I'm like, never do anything like stopping Jesus. If he wants to go somewhere, I'm with you. I'm going with you. I'm not trying to tell you what you should do instead. I never want to be called Satan. And so it's kind of, these were lessons for later. And it's not a waste if you only teach one person a lesson, but man, it multiplies more when one lesson for one person could be a lesson for two others or five others, depending on how many people in a group or discipleship you're pouring into.
You know what's interesting, Grant, is that there are a bunch of churches, and you know this, that are older people and have no young adults. That's really sad, right? Mm-hmm. And then there are these churches that have all these young adults, but they don't have older people.
Yeah.
I wish there was a way Thing could do, like link it, like take one boomer church, predominantly boomer, and one young adult church, and work out some kind of discipling matchup.
Yeah.
eHarmony for discipleship, But
yeah.
That would be so fast. I mean, I hear it all the time that we wish, the younger churches, we wish we had more older people to help mentor our young adults or disciple them. And anyway,
no, I think you're spot on. And you said this with the youth pastor too, as like being a connector. I think that doesn't need to be the number one gifting, but I do think it's a lost gifting we don't realize the power of is the gifting of being able to connect people. Some people just have intuition of like, you should know this person, or hey, I want to introduce you to, and it's like they don't go in a room just thinking, who should I know? They think like, who should I connect in this? Who should know each other that don't? And I do lean towards that kind of connective gifting and wiring. And I do think youth pastors, I definitely think small group leaders, small group pastors, that should be part of their wiring. Is it's not just small group pastor comes up with what courses or what books or what are we Bible studies are small groups going through. Is like, I don't just want them to learn something. I want them to connect with each other, and I want them definitely to multi-generationally connect into discipleship relationships.
Big time.
So it's like, how do we connect? Who should be connected in these small groups? So I do think it's often a content based strategy instead of like a connection based strategy.
Right. And, if I can quote, and I realize we're near our hour right now, that you have a quote from you. You said, for decades we've been asking the wrong question. How do we reach the next generation? But I don't think they want to be reached. They want to be launched. And they're looking for a community to belong to and mission to fight for. And unfortunately, this generation is saturated with content but starved of connection. Mm-hmm. And then you say, we don't have a next gen problem, we have a discipleship problem. And true discipleship is all about connection.
Yeah.
So that's just amazing, Grant. And you've just like unpacked our minds in so many different directions to rethink something that is radical, revolutionary, but relatively simple. Maybe hard to administrate en masse for a church, but relatively simple for somebody to say, who's somebody who would be open to this and could be a really great cataclysmic event by matching up. And the great thing, everybody, is, Grant is coming in March for the HIM 2025 conference. And it's so funny. I don't even have the date in front. March 13, 14, 15, I think it is. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's at Kola Ballrooms. And Grant is going to go way deeper on this issue. And so if this fascinates you or has some hooks for you, please come to that. And then he's going to do a general session too. And so we hope you could join us for that. Grant, thank you so much for being with us. Incredible. I don't know if you have one last thing to say, as we've said so many things, and maybe something popped in your mind like, oh, there's one more thing I want to say, and then I'll close off.
Yeah.
Is there anything?
Perfect, is because actually I wanted to ask you, who was the most influential older person in your life when you were young, and what did they do for you?
Oh, man. So, this is incredible you would ask me this, but it is a certain person who unfortunately just recently had a bad fall and is not cognitive. And I just thought, here is the person that mentored me, discipled me when I first became a Christian was I was 15. And he's in a very tough spot now, and so I've been trying to help him. But it's coincidental you should say that, because it's very heavy on my heart that it came right to the forefront of my mind. I owe him so much.
Yeah.
I owe him so much in high school, and now he's in a tough spot. So, yeah, good question. Thank you.
Yeah.
And everybody else, I just want to say in closing off, if you like this podcast, one of the way it's sustained is you might consider giving a donation, and you can go to himonline.org, himonline.org, and you can see a give button there, and it may even pop up on this podcast, and that would be awesome. And I hope you come to hear Grant coming up in March at HIM 2025. Beth Moore will be there, and Russell Moore, not related, editor-in-chief of Christianity Today. Becky Johnson, who Grant says is one of the all-time coolest next-gen speakers there are. And so also we have Father John Author, who is a Jesuit priest, talking about how do you discern God's will. Whoa, that's a big topic, and that's going to be like a 4-hour lective on Friday of the conference. So many things. Hope you can join us there, and it would be awesome to see you next time for the podcast. We have some other great guests, and hopefully see you at the HIM conference too. So Grant, again, thank you. We would say mahalo, which means thank you here in Hawaii, and so great that we could have you beaming in from Nashville, and we look forward to you when you and your wife Cheyenne fly in to join us for HIM 2025.
Yeah. Excited to be with you guys.
Okay, God bless everybody, and aloha.